Welcome to Reading Between the Reels. I'm Craig Dickinson.
And I'm Matt Leader. Today on the show, we are talking about Top Gun, the 1986 film starring none other than Tom Cruise. Craig, what are some of your overall thoughts about Top Gun?
I really like this movie. I'm so excited to be doing this movie, and it feels I watch it probably once a year. I think this is the one that's kind of in my rotation. I'm a kid of the '80s, and so I think 10 when this movie came out. I remember the first time I saw it was on VHS, though I didn't see it in the theater. So I'm curious about your experience with that. So I'm going to ask you that in a minute, what your first time you ever saw it was. But I remember it being a really big deal when it came out. And watching it now, it feels very much like of its time. It feels like an 80s movie, but in the best possible way. Like it doesn't really feel dated. Like, oh my gosh, that's cheesy and I can't believe that I'm watching this. But it's like an extended music video in a lot of ways. And they don't really make films like this anymore. And I think that's part of its charm for me. That along with the fact that it's real airplanes. It's like a real aircraft carrier. It's not CGI. So it's visceral in a way that you can't get now. And so I'm hopeful. And from what I'm hearing about the new movie, Top Gun Maverick, that it's going to feel like that same kind of 80s vibe. So I'm excited about that. So what about you, Matt? And when did you first see this movie?
Man, I saw it a long time ago. Mid 90s, maybe. And I think it's been that long since I last saw it. I have seen it several times, and but like the most recent was probably a decade or more ago. So it's been a very long time. And so like I remember some of the scenes and stuff. It did not age as well for me, I think, as it did for you. And maybe that's because of your rewatching it like somewhat regularly,
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think there are parts that are still very thrilling. There's parts that I just didn't really like. And like we can get right into that.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of unique with what you were saying about it not being CGI. Like there's no, fake stunts. They're not little model ships that they're wiggling around on a screen, right? It's real footage of jets, and you can tell. I think that's both a positive and a negative. And if you're ready, I think we can kind of jump like right into
Yeah.
it. I mean,
Absolutely.
I do think it was a bit of a phenomenon. I mean, it's a very popular film, and I think part of that is, excuse me, I think part of that's from Tom Cruise, which we'll talk about him in a little bit. But the cinematography I felt was both a strength and a weakness, because one of the things that's really important when you're talking about films that have these like ships is like spatial awareness of like where everything is. And I think the real footage does not lend itself to great spatial awareness. There were times when I'm watching this where it's like I'm excited, but I don't know what's going on. And I don't know where everyone is exactly. And like they do try, with like the character saying like, "Oh, he's on my tail." But at the same time, that it's not as thrilling as kind of I don't know. It didn't quite work as well for me the whole time. And there's scenes where it's like you have some beautiful shots, from the side of the airplane where it's clear they had like other planes up there with them, which are pretty cool. I think that the aerial footage is beautiful, and I think it's stunning in a way that you don't get a lot of, like you don't see a lot of that in other films. You don't see that footage of jets like that up close, far away, doing the kind of maneuvers that they're doing, and so that is kind of fun and special to see. For me, one of the high water marks of like that kind of aerial dogfighting is actually the movie Dunkirk. Christopher Nolan film.
Hmm.
Roughly 1/3 of that is from the aerial perspective of war, and I think that Nolan did a phenomenal job. And I know he used a lot of practical, planes and effects in that film too. And that's where it's like, to me, Top Gun doesn't quite hit that mark in terms of the pure cinematography of like both being beautiful and practical from the sense of like the audience. And so that's one of my maybe two gripes with the film is a lot of times they're just kind of like you kind of lose yourself in the blue open skies, you know. What are your thoughts, Craig?
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I'm looking at my notes, and as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking of how we approach this movie in very different ways. That I think you looked at it for some of these, like the logic and the technical aspects of like does it make sense for me to build, like I said, be able to track, geography of the different planes. And I think for me, really what it was just how it felt. It's much more an emotional, visceral thing for me. And that worked for me because I felt like that it was very immersive by being inside the cockpit a lot, which, it's interesting. I'm teaching Star Wars to my students this week, and watching the trench run, like that's where they got that from. It feels like Star Wars is a heavy influence on that. But it's the same way where even if I don't know necessarily where the planes are, I know who the characters are very well. I can tell, the pilot and his Rio behind him. I know who that pair is. And as they're talking to the other ones, I get a feel of who all of these characters are. So on an emotional level, that works. And we talked about having like the camera pods on the outside of the airplane to kind of get you in the middle of it. You don't necessarily know what's going on or where everybody is, but it feels like you're part of it. And it was very revolutionary at the time to be able to have that. I'm up there with them, in a way that you couldn't get. And we know that obviously there's other airplanes up there. There's like a Learjet taking footage as well, but to actually strap a camera on the airplane, on the fighter jet, I think was a great move. And then again, going back to Star Wars, like when I see Rogue One and the Battle of Scarif, I'm like, hey, that's like in Top Gun. And, it was a way we hadn't seen it in Star Wars. So it's kind of funny how things go, full circle that way. But I think, along with that, there's some of the other things that I was impressed with was kind of the gold in the early morning with like the silhouettes, where again, I can't really tell what's happening, but I get this feel of it. And so I think for me, and part of it's my nostalgia glasses too, that it feels cool and it feels immersive.
Yeah, and a lot of color on those sunsets too. I mean, that's and like the shots are beautiful. There is definitely, for the actual like color grading and like color, it's all very natural. It's all very real life. It's not really trying to add a lot to the story through color, through camera work, in the sense of like you might see from someone like a kind of more of an auteur, a director or cinematographer, which is fine for the story that they're telling. What you said kind of reminded me a little bit of Avatar, the James Cameron Avatar, how people were blown away by that film in theaters, the 3D. Yeah. And it was kind of a technical marvel, much in the same way that Star Wars, the original Star Wars, was when it came out and was first released in theaters. People had never seen anything quite like that before. And it captured people's imaginations in a way. And I think that might be a little bit of our divide on the film is, you have some of that wonder still left over from when you first saw it, right? And it was a bit more of a unique thing where, I've had these other experiences in these films, and it wasn't as mind-blowing for me when I saw it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's 1986, so it's middle of the Cold War, right? It's against the Russians. I'm a 10-year-old kid watching this, and I wasn't paid attention to what was going on in the world. So this was, this was real in a lot of sense, and this is notoriously one of the big recruiting tools for the Navy. Like, it wasn't intentionally, like the Navy didn't put this out, but the Navy reaped the benefits of so many people watching this movie and going, I want to do that.
Didn't the Navy help with it? I could be wrong.
Well, I mean, they did help,
but
with,
it
as far
wasn't
as
like a
loaning
Navy commercial. I mean, it
Right.
was, but it
Yeah,
wasn't.
I mean, they lent them their planes and
Right.
things like that, and gave them full access to locations and things like that. But
And we have that for other films like Transformers. Is
sure,
sort of a more
pretty much
recent
anything
example.
Michael Bay does.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. But speaking of the Top Gun classrooms and having Miramar as part of the actual location, like it's weird that there's no lights and no air conditioning in those buildings apparently, because everybody's really sweaty.
Very sweaty.
Very sweaty. But there is just like, they don't ever turn any lights on, which I thought was an interesting choice. And I think I'd always kind of noticed it, but this time watching it deliberately, I'm like, wow, they're really they got the blinds cracked and there's, everybody's kind of half in shadow and it's always sunset. It's like, it's always golden hour while they're having class, which is a kind of a cool effect. But it's not like, I'm assuming these guys probably work more hours than that. Not just going in there from like
Just
4:45 to 5:30.
Motorcycles around, in the morning, and then they get to class in the golden hour.
But it's beautiful, and again, it kind of just goes back to that. It looks cool, looks good. I like the feel of it.
Sure.
More than that, some great first person stuff.
Yeah.
I thought too. Just that always is interesting to me watching at the beginning when Cougar's trying to land the plane on the aircraft carrier,
and it has that real swingy back and forth camera, like first person.
Yep. Which is, they have that kind of juxtaposed with extreme close up on his eyes as he's freaking out. And, and then he tosses his wings, and that's an extreme close up too. So just some kind of fun, dynamic, interesting, mix of choices of shots there. So some fun stuff there.
Yeah, and in a pretty gripping opening, little prologue to the film too.
Yep.
And like I said, it's been a while since I last saw it, and man, I was kind of locked in with that prologue, and it kind of shows you what the ultimate hurdle is going to be later on in the movie, which is that overcoming the yips, overcoming the fear and the whatever it might be that's bothering the pilot. Like that's ultimately what Maverick has to overcome.
Yeah, I never quite thought of it exactly that way, but you're absolutely right. It's kind of a circular plot in that way, where you do come right back to that same place with a lot of the same people, and yeah, that he has the same kind of issue that Cougar had. So that's a good call.
Yeah, foreshadow.
Yeah, it's very nice. Moving on to sound. If we talked about the beginning, I mean, it starts right off with that, that great theme song, and then Danger Zone kicks in, and that movie it's not a slow burn at all. This movie is like, boom, you're in a rock video, like I said earlier.
Yeah,
almost immediately planes are taking off and let's go. What did you think about the sound for Top Gun?
Danger Zone's amazing. It's the perfect song to go with the film. There's a couple songs that are kind of, playing throughout the or important, throughout the whole film. It doesn't get better than Danger Zone. And like how you were talking about how the film feels when Danger Zone is playing, and I want to say they played it like 3 times in the movie, maybe more.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. That's when I most felt like the adrenaline, like the rush that I think you were kind of tapping into. And so those were kind of my favorite parts, is when that music was playing, you saw the awesome jets just flying around. I mean, I want to say one of the times was at the beginning when Tom Cruise is on his motorcycle and he's like racing along with the fighter jet taking off.
Yep.
And like, that's such a cool little moment, both visually and with the music, that it kind of gives you, this is what the movie's about. and if you're into that, you're going to like the movie. Right. I thought the rest of the music was like the non-diegetic music, which I'm sure you'll bring up and talk about a little bit more, was fine. But really, it's all about Kenny Loggins and the Danger Zone. I mean, that's what people remember, right?
Yeah. So just real quick, a couple things on the Danger Zone is, one, I'm just remembering now that I actually saw Kenny Loggins live at Great America in Northern California. I think it was 88. So a couple years after this came out, and it's near an airport. So I remember vividly hearing Danger Zone while airplanes were taking off, and that just adding to the whole vibe of it.
Now, quick question.
Yeah.
I'm sure you don't know. Do you think
Yeah.
real life pilots play Danger Zone like all the time?
I would.
Like you're on your little like puddle jumper, like Alaska Airlines, 100 person going down to Portland. And it's like Danger Zone.
If I was a boxer, I'd be listening to Eye of the Tiger too. I mean, come on, let's do it. So Danger Zone is fantastic, and you're right. It's at least 3 times.
Yeah.
But I think if there's more than 3, then forgive me. But at least on the third one of the ones is right before Goose dies.
Mm-hmm.
It's in that sequence when they take off. And this time I noticed it because I was kind of keeping track of how often I was hearing it. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is the part where Goose dies. And what made me so impressed by that was using it here. We've heard the song a couple times, and I feel invincible when I hear that song. Right? I'm getting fired up. I feel great about things. And then this tragedy comes out of nowhere because like they're not playing fair. I just heard Danger Zone. That nothing bad can happen now. And then the unthinkable happens. And they just like pull the rug out from under us.
Yeah, it's a great catch. I did not think about that.
So
that is the invincible song for them. Like,
yeah. But other good songs in this one too. I mean, obviously the Berlin song "Take My Breath Away" was huge, won an Academy Award and a Golden Globe. That's, and if there's 2 big songs from this one,
right?
But I also think that the score is pretty good. I really like the Top Gun theme that we hear at the beginning, and we also hear at the end. It's Harold Faltermeyer, who also did he did some stuff. He did like Beverly Hills Cop and the Fletch movies. And when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, that's that same kind of heavy synth. It's definitely mid 80s type of thing. Like he's the one who wrote Axel F, the Beverly Hills Cop theme, which is like talking about earworms. Like that one just gets stuck in your head. I'm like, yeah, that's the same guy. That makes sense. And of course, he worked with Bruckheimer on Beverly Hills Cop and then on Top Gun as well. But I think that song's great and kind of underrated because of how awesome Danger Zone is.
I do think the sound effects too were pretty good. The jets, everything. I don't know. Maybe you know this. Did they record some of the live sounds when they were using the jets?
I should have, but I don't know because especially like
it sounds like pretty realistic.
Yeah, it feels real.
Yeah,
and that missile lock sound stresses me out every time.
Yep. The constant beeping and then the one tone where it's like they got lock.
Yeah, I'm sucked in again. Just real quick though, you did mention, obviously there's diegetic music in this movie too. Some of it performed by Tom Cruise, and he's awful at it, which is funny that they call that out. She's like, I don't have to worry about you.
Keep your day job.
Keep your day job. So we have that, and of course, or he's singing "You've Lost That Love and Feeling," and of course, "Great Balls of Fire," which I think was probably the first time I ever heard "Great Balls of Fire" was in this movie.
I think it was for a lot of people.
They're bringing it back, baby. So yeah, good mix of stuff. Lots of pop songs. The soundtrack for this was very successful, like 9 times platinum. So, and again, this is early. It's mid 80s, so it's the early days of home video. So this is how I experienced this movie. Is I'm going to buy the tape, probably the cassette tape, not even the CD at that point. So yeah, I'll probably also lend to it. But it was also just a great mix of current artists. And some good instrumental stuff on there. Anything else on sound that you want to talk about before we move to performance?
No, but I do want to talk about Tom Cruise.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on our leading man?
I don't think he's ever been more confident than in this movie.
Yeah.
Supremely confident in all situations. Like people call him out on stuff. He's like, "Yep, isn't that crazy? Yes, it is. I did it anyway." So like, he frequently succeeds, even though he screws around and does things he's not supposed to do.
Yeah,
it's kind of an interesting, like, wouldn't that just continue to inspire to keep doing those things if you kept getting away with it?
That's definitely what the movie shows.
Right.
So I completely agree with Tom Cruise being, more confident than he's ever been. He has this kind of 1,000-yard crazy eyes stare where he has this intensity about that's for me. It wasn't confidence, it was just intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And like it works, it fits with the film. But it's like he's not a good person. I shouldn't say he's like a bad person, but I do think like Iceman was right when he's like, you're more dangerous than the enemy right now because you aren't like under control. You can't control yourself.
Yeah.
And
dangerous and foolish.
Right. And we see that several times throughout the film. So it's like, it's one of those cases where the main hero is not really that heroic, and like looking back on it after Goose dies, I'm forgetting the captain's name.
We talking about Viper?
Yes, Viper.
Yeah.
And he's just like, Goose is dead. Get over it. And it's like,
yeah,
that's mean.
You gotta let him go.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
And it's like the day after, and they let him then go on the mission, like to end the movie, right? The end mission. And it's like, that's not safe. That's not good. Like, and Iceman even like, he's like, it's nothing personal, but is Maverick really the person for the job right now? It's like, no, he's not. Yeah. He can't fly, not even in like simulation, like the training. So it's like a total failure in like real life, a real life situation. And it's like, it has to happen that way because of the movie. But you know what I mean? Like,
I know, I totally do. Because I'm thinking now of how when I'm younger, I'm watching this movie and I'm all about Tom Cruise and I'm on his side. And, who's the bad Ice is the bad guy, right? If there's a bad guy, it's Val Kilmer's character. Mm-hmm. And then watching it now, I'm like, no, he's not a bad.
No,
he plays by the rules. He does everything he's supposed to do. He follows orders.
Still the best.
And he's still the best because of those things. Yeah. Like he gets what's coming to him, like cause and effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so does Maverick. He does one too many things that he's not supposed to do. Yeah. So kind of an deeply flawed protagonist in this film.
Mm-hmm. Who gets rewarded for like what he does. Like when you think about it, like even Goose's death, it wasn't his fault. Like he didn't actually do anything wrong that time.
No, that was Iceman.
Well, yeah, and arguably, that wasn't even wrong per se.
No, it was just it's an accident,
right?
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I mean. It's like the one time that like he gets consequences. Tom Cruise, that is. It's like he's playing by the book. He's not making the foolhardy mistake. Every time he makes the foolhardy decision, it pays off for him. You know what I mean? He gets the girl. He, shoots down all the planes at the end. He doesn't, I guess doesn't get the trophy, right? But that's probably more to do from Goose's accident than anything else. So it's like,
he didn't get to finish the program. So,
right. And like, that's just how it went. But it's just like, no, Tom Cruise is not the good guy. And it's not to say he's bad. It's just, he's flawed, like, but he's not the person you should be like admiring. And I think, like you said, growing up, he was definitely the person that you're looking up to.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's even thinking about, when he gets to go to Top Gun, he was number 2, and then the other guy bails out, and so he gets it by default. Yeah, and it's kind of played for a joke, and they kind of play it off, and like, well, those guys are jerks for calling him out for that, but they're also right.
Yeah.
Which leads me to, again, one of my favorite all-time lines is, and really not just from this movie, but movies in general, is your ego's writing checks your body can't cash.
Yep.
He's right.
Mm-hmm.
He's routinely doing things that he should not be. Eventually the odds are going to catch up with him.
And they don't. Which is the ironic thing.
Yeah. Crazy. But yeah, the kind of like the quintessential Tom Cruise 80s performance. Like he had a whole bunch of movies after, like Days of Thunder is very much this movie, but as a race car and some other things. It's like this is the one that kind of put him on the map as that type of supremely arrogant character.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's 24. He's super young too, which adds to that, I think, which makes sense too. Like, you know, when you're a kid like that, you think you know everything. Clearly you don't.
Right.
But
it's all about that feeling though.
It fits. Feels the need for speed, man.
Yep. I think like other than that, like the whole love story feels pretty like cheap. Like it doesn't quite feel earned. Like it's fine. Like it's definitely not like the worst in the world or anything, but I didn't think it was. I remember like, oh man, you know, it's got this, you know, cool love story. And it's like, no, it's not. It's just like they have to, you know, a talk and listen to some music. They go to school together, and then she's like, "I've fallen for you," and it's like, okay.
What? Well, he even has that look too, that look of shock.
Yeah.
You know, he's just like, talk about
not
that
even he
yard
bite
stare.
it. Like,
yeah, he's a what? Like you wanted to talk about the MiG. That's why you had me over the first time.
Right.
It wasn't even about me. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So there's, you know, it's an 80s movie, but yeah, you're right. And she's significantly older than him too. She's like 5 to 6 years older than him. She's higher up on the chain of command than him.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of reasons why that should not work, but you got to have a love story in this movie apparently. So
do you think
which is fine. Do
you think it really needed
Berlin
it?
Music video? No.
I'd say, you know, rewatching it's like I don't think it really needed that.
No. Because he doesn't really change because of it. You know, I don't think he really changes at all.
No.
Like, what's the significance of having her in the film exactly?
I think it's kind of a stereotypical getting the girl kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
And like, it's not the worst. It's just not the best either.
Yeah. Which reminds me of our conversation about Ghostbusters, and you talked about how you didn't like Venkman, right? So does it kind of fit that same thing for you, where he doesn't really deserve that?
Absolutely. And it's the same kind of thing where it's like he, in a lot of ways, is played as the hero of the film. And it's like, I think Venkman is on a couple levels kind of disgusting. Like, he's not the worst person in the world, but he's not, in my opinion, like a good person. I think the Tom Cruise, you know, Maverick character is a decent person. He's just very arrogant and cocky, you know. It's not that, like, he doesn't do anything that's particularly, like, bad or disgusting. I think you could make the argument that he, like, puts other people in danger. That's bad, right? But I think, but I think, like, the way the movie portrays it is that it's not like he's taking, like, huge risk. He buzzes the air tower, you know, and he doesn't, like, follow his wingman into combat, where it's like, okay, it's still training, though, right? So it's like, that is where you get those kinds of things out, and it's where you iron those kinds of things out. So it's like, it doesn't feel quite as bad to me. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting. I've seen some speculation already, and so this isn't my theory, but I do subscribe to it, that, you know, Kelly McGillis, who plays Charlie, the love interest in this film, she's not in the sequel. She's not in Top Gun Maverick. She's not really acting anymore either. But there's been some speculation that part of that's going to be that, like, that didn't work out because he was the guy he was and didn't change.
Yeah.
You know, in a lot of the ways, like we talked about how, you know, Ghostbusters 2 is like,
with Venkman,
actually work out. You know, it was just a temporary thing. So
it'll
be interesting to see how if that's paid off in that way. Cause I think those are valid concerns. Like, as a 24-year-old, very immature, cocky guy, like, that's not a long-term partner in a romantic relationship.
Not unless he changes, which he doesn't in the film.
Right. So, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that, like, overall, I think the performances were pretty spot on. I think the intensity that Cruise brings is kind of a weird energy, but it works for that kind of stereotypical jock fighter pilot, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where that would not fly in other roles, but it works for this one.
Yeah, those guys have to be incredibly, they got to be arrogant. They have to be
Right.
supremely confident because of what they're doing.
Right.
Like they're risking their lives every time they step into that airplane.
And Iceman, Val Kilmer has that same intensity.
Yep.
We're just not following him, for the film. So it's like we don't get him as much.
Yeah. I mean, that's a character I wouldn't mind have seen an entire movie about.
Yeah.
I think he's a really great character. And one of his, Val Kilmer's great in this. He's a very underrated actor in my opinion.
Yeah.
But like I said earlier, like I didn't like him, but I don't know if you're not supposed to because he's not the protagonist, but he's not a bad guy.
Right.
Anthony Edwards is also great
Mm-hmm.
and hilarious. And
a nice foil.
You feel it when he dies. Every time I watch this, I know he's going to, but it's still every time like, man, every time. I hate that. I did want to mention too, I mentioned earlier how much sweat there is. Everybody's sweaty on that aircraft carrier too.
Yeah.
Like there's no air conditioning in any Navy facilities at all, which is interesting. But everybody's wearing the aviator glasses.
Yep.
The costuming in this is very distinctive. Those leather jackets, like, we talked about like on the motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, that's kind of this iconic image of that. The big spiky hair. That's some of these things are very 80s.
Early 90s.
Things.
Yeah.
Yeah, early 90s stuff too. I like the Top Gun hats. That always kind of cracked me up. I suppose, especially when Viper puts it on. Yeah. Like I'm going outside, I'm putting on my Top Gun hat.
Top Gun.
Like I'm going to advertise the school I work at.
Yeah.
But one thing I did notice this time that I guess I kind of always seen but didn't really put a connection to was the Russians' helmets. They're basically opaque, so we can't really see their faces.
Just like
which is in
stormtroopers.
direct. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's that same thing, right?
Yeah.
Because we see the pilots. We mentioned earlier how we get to know the pilots, the U.S. pilots, but we don't get to know these guys. Don't have names.
Nope,
they're anonymous.
Yep.
Way easier to kill. We don't have any sympathy for these guys at all. Like you said, that's perfect, man. They're stormtroopers.
Yep. Faceless baddies.
Yep.
And
so,
do they mention that they're Russians?
Oh yeah,
explicitly. I think I missed that. Because I saw
I'm fairly certain they do, and then there's the red star on the.
I saw the red star
too,
and that reminds me of North Korea. But I think mid 80s was before kind of North Korea was a big thing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think they're pretty definitively Russians and USSR Russians.
Yeah,
because this is
specifically Soviet, like
exactly. Yeah, I'm fairly certain the word Soviet probably shows up in there at some point, but. Yeah, but I'm glad that you picked that up because exactly I was like, well, they're definitively the bad guys. Mm-hmm. There's no sympathy there. There's no backstory there. They're just, faceless bad dudes. Kill them.
Just straw men.
Yep.
There to be knocked down. So any final thoughts as we're kind of like, because I feel like those were like the two big things for me is like the camera work, the feeling was definitely there. I got a little lost in the details. The music, I think, works. And then the characters, I think, largely work. But yeah, any kind of other thoughts that you have? So
I did want to talk briefly about locations, mainly because I lived in San Diego for 5 years. And when I was down there, I went by Miramar on the freeway one day. I'm like, oh my gosh, This is where Top Gun used to. It's not there anymore. Yeah. But even more than that, there's a house. The house that stands in for Charlie's house, the exterior of that is in Oceanside, which I used to live in Oceanside. And it's marked up in the sense that people have put posters in the windows so you can tell that it's the Top Gun house. That's what it's called. Right. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's totally worn down and it's just kind of there. So most people that go by don't have any idea that it's a filming location, and you can go right there and say, there it is. This is where it was. And I just thought that was cool. I've been by there a couple of times. I'm like, this is that from that scene in Top Gun.
Yeah.
A couple of times he drives by there and watching it this time, I'm like, I know that place. It's right by the ocean. I've been there. And this summer, I definitely want to go check out the Kansas City barbecue place, which they go. And there's one of the last scenes is there when she comes back and finds him after he's about to quit. And that's the Great Balls of Fire scene is in there too. So yeah, both of the, there's tons of places around San Diego that this is where they filmed it. It's not on a set. It's like legitimately, somewhere at air stations. Yeah. Places you can go. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Your comment about the locations actually remind me about the props in terms of like the helmets. which I thought was very clever, to have the names and very distinctive decorating on the helmets.
Yes.
Because when their masks are up, you can't see who's who. So really the only thing you're relying on are those helmets to differentiate. Like, and you can hear it in their voice a little bit, but it's like, from a visual perspective, those are among the most important kinds of props that you have in, like, I can remember, because those are what we identify as, like, the characters, like who they are.
Yeah. Well, and if speaking of props too, I just want to point out Goose's dog tags is a big thing too, where he symbolically lets him go, and also
tosses.
It's such a weird throw when he throws it into the ocean, though. It's such an awkward throw. Like, has he ever thrown a baseball? I don't know. It just looks so weird. But that was another good use of leitmotif earlier too. I meant to mention too that there's a song called "Memories," which is the song that's playing when he's looking at the picture of his dad first, and then later on after Goose dies, they keep playing it. Like the whole scene where the helicopter comes and pulls the body out of the ocean and stuff. That's slow instrumental. It's the same, but you heard it first when Maverick was looking at the picture of his dad. So kind of a cool use of
both moments of loss for him.
Yeah. Kind of on an underrated score, I think. He doesn't have a ton of stuff to do in this film because of all the pop music.
Yeah.
But
there's a lot of it too.
That's a ton of pop music. Gloria Estefan has a song. But I think with the time that he gets, Harold Faltermeyer does a really, really good job. I also wanted to, so getting down to final thoughts though, much better end credit sequence than Dune, although it reminded me of Dune, where they play the music at the end and you get to see all the actors with the names. It's kind of fun. In Dune, it was really cheesy, but here it kind of works. I'm like, yeah, we're taking a victory lap with the Righteous Brothers playing. Oh my gosh, I just remembered there was something else I wanted to mention. So in the scene where, this is just kind of random, but we talked about the hero's journey a little bit and how does he change? And the only thing I can really think of is that he kind of makes peace with his family legacy, right? About his dad.
Yeah.
When he hears the truth from Viper. But with something I caught this time, and again, I've seen this movie many, many times, is he's talking to Charlie and he's talking about his mom. So he's listening to the music playing and he mentions how his mom wanted him to, come upstairs or play the music or what have you. And he says that she died shortly after him. And there's like a pause. And I was like, did his mom commit suicide? Was she depressed after this and then take her own life?
Yeah.
They don't really talk about it after that, but I felt like that was kind of a legitimate way to read that.
Yeah, I think.
Did you catch that at all?
I did not catch it, but now that you've mentioned it, it feels like a legit reading. Like, I think you could definitely take that away from it.
Yeah, I mean, she's up in her room and just calling down to him to play the music, and she's definitely isolated. And we don't see her. We don't hear anything more about her.
Right. So it's hard to tell. But
he's kind of an orphan.
Yeah. I mean, he even says that, where I think he says to Goose, like, you're my only family.
Yeah. So in a movie that's not made in the 80s, that's supposed to be an action movie, that might be a thing you actually explore. But it'd be interesting to see if there was versions of the script where that was.
Well, and maybe that'll make it an appearance in the sequel.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an area where the writers explore that a little bit more.
Yeah, that would be fun. But I'm excited for the sequel. I did a little research on that too, and found that Jennifer Connelly, who plays the love interest in that, she's actually playing Penny Benjamin, who is mentioned like one time in this movie when they're talking about he did the flybys, and like one time over Admiral's daughter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not a new character. So that's kind of fun that we're tying things back in. But I'm very excited about the new movie. That's, I think, my biggest final thought. It's just, I'm hearing great things. The reviews are like, feels like an 80s movie, which to me, that's like, I'm there. That's all you had to say.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing that it's really, really good.
I think the last thing that I kind of have with this is just how kind of it felt very silly right at the end when Tom Cruise gets back and they have that moment, just like in Star Wars, where it's like they land their plane, they get out, and everyone's like cheering them, and then like a couple scenes after that, I think it's Viper talking to him. He's like, "So what do you want to do? You're famous." He's like, "Oh, I want to be a Top Gun instructor." And it's just like, so you have one combat mission and then you retire? Like, that's it?
They let him do whatever he wants.
It's a,
God help us.
it's a lot of money the Navy spent on training him for him to just... And it's like, do we really think Maverick would make a good teacher? I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Maybe
No,
that's the point of the sequel, right? Is they explore that angle.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, you said all the money they spent training him. I'm like, all the money they spent training all the other pilots, that he's going to mess that up.
Sure. Yeah.
Hey, all that stuff you learned, we're doing it different.
Right.
That'll be fun to see how that plays out, because we do kind of feel like we're going to get that in this next film.
At least possibly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as we close, we just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you would like to connect with us, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook. Email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com or use the SpeakPipe app on our website.
If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast catcher. We'd love to hear your feedback, and it really helps us get the word out about the podcast. And if you haven't yet, please join our Facebook group. It's a safe place to share your thoughts and discuss all things related to movies.
One last thing, our next episode will be a review of Jurassic Park, the original. Send us an email or voicemail about your favorite moments from Jurassic Park, and we'll share them on the next episode.